Being able to build components in React is all well and good, but to be considered a professional software engineer, you have to know how to test them. Watch this video to learn how. We're going to be using a couple of libraries to do our React unit testing. The first is Jest from jestjs.io. Jest is a JavaScript unit testing library used by Facebook. There are some competitors for it, but it is probably the most popular. We'll also be using Enzyme. Enzyme is a testing utility from Airbnb, which is meant specifically for testing React components. It can be used in conjunction with Jest to test our components. To demo this, I've created a new React app with the Create React App utility. If you don't know about this util, check out my Getting Started with React video. Create React App installs Jest and sets up unit testing for us, so we don't have to worry about that. If we take a look in the project's src folder, you'll see that there's already a file, app.test.js, which tests the app component using Jest. So if we go in the terminal in the project's root directory and type in npm run test, it will run Jest, which will pick up on this file because it's postfixed with .test.js, and it will run it using Jest. As you can see from the output, the test has passed. The tests actually run in watch mode, which means each time we save a file, they'll be triggered and run again. So we're going to exit the test runner, and we're actually going to delete app.test.js as we don't want it running each time. This is just to save time for the video because we don't care about testing the app component. I've added a component called myComponent to the project, and this is what we're going to be testing. The component is a div, and it contains a button and another div with some text. The idea is pressing the button toggles whether or not the text div is shown. So let's test it. So let's create a test file for this component. It will be myComponent.test.js. I'm going to do a very simple and also very useless test first, just to show you a little bit of what Jest can do. Jest has a function called describe. Describe groups related tests into a block to create a test suite. This makes our test output more readable. Since we're testing myComponent, we will do a describe to contain all the myComponent tests. First argument to this function call is a string, which will be the name of the test suite, so we will call it myComponent. Next is a function that contains all the tests for this suite. This suite will contain a series of tests, and we define a test using the it function. First argument is a string to say what the test is for. For now, we'll just put should be true. Next is a function containing the body of the test. This will be a contrived example. So we create a const called foo, and we set it to be true. To test that foo is indeed true, we assert this using the expect function and a matcher. So we do expect foo to be true. So expect takes the value to test, and the matcher defines what we expect the value to be like. In this case, equal to true. It does exactly like it reads really, so we expect foo to be true. To be is just one of the dozens of matchers that comes with Jest and simply does an equality check. There are many more. Check the Jest documentation to discover them all for yourself at jestjs.io. So we'd expect that to pass as foo is true. Now let's do a failing test. We add a new test doing it should be false. We create foo again, and again we set it to be true. Then we do expect foo to be false. This assertion of course will fail, and this will cause the tests not to pass. In the terminal we do npm run test, and let's see what happens. So actually, both of our tests has failed, which is surprising because that means we failed to assert something that is true. There's obviously a problem with the code, and inspecting it, we can see that 2b on the first test should be with an uppercase B, but it's not, and so that caused the test to fail when it should have passed. So we just save, the test's rerun because it's in watch mode, and now we get the should be true test passing, the should be false test failing. So this is at the very heart of what unit testing is. We take some code, we make assertions about what it does. We're saying we expect this piece of code to do this, and if it doesn't, it means there's a bug or that the code is wrong in some way. A single React component is a unit of code, so we want to be able to say we expect this component does X, Y, and Z, and if it doesn't, the code for the component is wrong. Now, there are some problems testing React components. To work, React components need to be mounted to the browser's DOM, but we're on the command line here, we're not in a browser, there is no DOM. There are utilities that give us a mock DOM, but mounting to them can be slow, and we want fast tests. The DOM is also global, and we want our tests to be self-contained, so they shouldn't modify something global. There's also other concerns. For example, how the hell do we test user events from the code? Like say in my component, there's a button, and we want to be able to test what happens when the button is clicked. How do we do this? Enzyme helps us with all of this. We need to install Enzyme and the adapter it uses to interface with the version of React we're using. So we're going to do npm install --save dev enzyme and then enzyme-adapter-react-16. I'm using version 16.x of React, but check the Enzyme GitHub for the right adapter for you to use based on whatever version of React you're using. In our test file, we need to do some imports. We need to import React, and we need to import Enzyme and also a function called shallow. We need to import something called adapter from enzyme-adapter-react-16. Lastly, we also need to import my component as we want to test it. We need to configure Enzyme to use the adapter to make it work. Now, this would usually be done in a test setup file, so you don't have to do it in each and every test. See the Jest and Enzyme docs on how to do this. For now, for simplicity, we'll just do it within this test. So it's enzyme.configure, and then you pass it an object with a key of adapter and a value of new adapter. So what is it we want to test? We have a component that by default shows the text div, then hides it when the button is clicked. So let's test for those things. Our first test will be that it should show the text. So in order to test the component, we need an instance of it which we can easily examine and make assertions against. This is where Enzyme's shallow function comes in. It allows us to render a React component to an object in memory instead of to the DOM, which makes it faster. It wraps that object in a wrapper that gives us functions to easily examine the rendered component. So we create a const called wrapper, and the value is the result of calling shallow and passing it a myComponent element. One thing the wrapper does is it allows us to search through the elements rendered using CSS style selectors, a bit like you would with jQuery. So if we look at our component, the component we're interested in is a div with some text in it, and it itself sits within this outer div. So going back to our test, we create a new const text, and it's going to be the result of doing wrapper.find, with find finding elements based on a selector, and the selector we want for a div within a div is just div. Since we are testing that the text div exists, a good test would be that this element contains the correct text we're expecting. Text itself is also a wrapper, and wrappers have a function, also called text, confusingly, that return a text node if it exists within the matched elements. So we can do expect text.text to be text goes here, which is the text that should be within the div. So we save this and then just clear that from the terminal, and then we do npm run test again. And there we go, the test passes. Now we want to test that after clicking the button, the text gets hidden, or rather removed altogether. So a new test should hide text when button is clicked. Seems simple enough. So again, we do another shallow render of my component. And again, we use find to find the element, the button element in this case. So now our problem is, how the hell do we click the button without a user interface? Enzyme again comes to the rescue. It has a function called simulate that can simulate DOM events. So we do button.simulate and we pass a string, click, and this will simulate a click event on the button. So now we simply find the text div again. Now this time, of course, it shouldn't exist. So the text is again a wrapper, and the wrapper has a length field which gives us the number of matched elements. So we can expect that to be 0. So the text just doesn't exist if that's true. So we rerun the unit tests. And that second test, the should hide text when button is clicked, has failed because that text wrapper has a length of 1 when it's meant to be 0, so the text still exists. So it appears our test has found a bug, which is great. So if we look at the code for the component, we find our bug. The text div is not shown conditionally, so we just fix that. We then save, and the tests will already be rerunning because of watch mode. And let's see. Now we have green lights, and we can be sure our component works even without viewing it in the browser, thanks to unit tests. I have new videos going out regular as clockwork every Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday at 9 AM Eastern Time. Click that subscribe button now and don't miss them.